Okay, hello my little friends, and welcome to Programming with Objects Lecture 2. And this is just called Getting Started. So essentially at the end of this I'll give you a list of instructions or some guidelines, hopefully, to give you enough of a sufficient clue to install Microsoft Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition, which is freely downloadable, and it should be compatible with the Mac OS. And it's of course Windows compatible as well, so it shouldn't pose you any significant problems. So we'll go through this rather quickly, and then hopefully the lab after that that I'm going to provide will just be a sort of simple program for you to get used to the environment. So nothing really particularly taxing today, although this is relatively lengthy in terms of the installation process. Because this is a large, complex package and does require a significant amount of time to put onto your PC. Now, I do have it on my own laptop at home. I would have possibly made you a video on the installation process, but I think to myself, why should I put myself through that horror? Because if I take Visual Studio off of my laptop and then put it on, it's just going to create a whole world of heartache, because the software is stable on that system at the moment. If I had access to my office, I would have done it, but I'm not doing it because it's my last lifeline. That laptop is my last lifeline at the moment, so never put that in jeopardy, people. And I apologise for my attire today. I'm a little bit more formal because I'm having to make a sort of official video later on for the course. So I hope you're all safe and well. If my emails would give me, that's why I've got to suffer all day, bing, bing, bing. If my emails would give me a minute's peace, I'll complete this lecture. So this is just the instructions of getting Microsoft Visual Studio 2019 installed in your machine. I don't know what's happened to my lectures. Okay, so introducing C#. We've spoken about C# before. In this course, we'll look at C#. We may also look at C++ if we have sufficient time. So C# is a very popular programming language. It's very, very simple. It's kind of related to Java, very similar in a way. But also, it's good for writing computer games, computer programs, of course. And it's the underlying sort of language associated with Unity. So these are games engines that you're going to be learning later, so very, very useful, okay? And C++ is the underlying language associated with Unreal, okay? So the integrated development environment that we're going to be using for this module is going to be Microsoft Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition. Now, try not to download the Professional Edition. I think there may be fees associated with that. I'm not sure, but Community Edition, there are no fees. You can also use 2015, 2017. Why you would want to, I only sort of put that in there to cover myself, because we do generally have multiple versions of this in the lab computers because of software stability for different modules. It's project-based. It contains source code, resources and configurations, and you'll have a number of projects and solutions, but we'll discuss that later. So here are the installation instructions. This is for your home machine. This takes quite a bit of time, people, so sort of bear with me. And it's Community Edition 2019, so it should kind of look like this. Hopefully it still does look like this, but if it doesn't, then there should be sufficient clues to actually go and download this anyway. So here we have it, Microsoft Visual Studio 2019. You're selecting the Community Edition 2019, which is free for individual developers, academic uses and open source. Excellent. So the idea is click there, or click on the equivalent of there. Okay? Then after you've clicked on that, this, as usual, the sort of standard run, save as, cancel, what do you want to do with this file? It's an exe file that has to run in order to set up the installation process. Now you can either run that immediately, or you can save it to your desktop or the downloads or whatever, and then run it from there. I would probably just save the file and run it again if you need to. Okay. Seems to be the same. So after all that is sort of done, it says we'll put in the Visual Studio installer, so it will install the Visual Studio installer. And it'll say almost done, getting everything ready. So that's step one, more or less complete. Okay. Right, so the next step here is about the constituents of the environment that you actually want. Now, you have a lot of options here, but the ones to certainly select for the purposes of this course are select both of these options. So .NET Desktop Development, so you get C#, Visual Basic and F#, and Universal Windows Platform Development, so you get C#, Visual Basic and C++. Now, it's been a while since I've actually done this, but hopefully that should be acceptable. You've got other things that you can download as well, so do have a cursory glance through it. There's game development with Unity, which I think would probably be quite fun, but definitely for the purposes of this module, select those. And if you don't worry too much about it, you can go back and alter the installation later. So then it begins, downloading and verifying, and it takes a relatively long time. So we're at this now, and I have actually, for the purposes of illustration, put in the time there. So it's 17:03 at that point, and it's not really finished yet. It's installing the packages at the moment. So we're now at 17:41. So this takes a long time, my peeps. Very long time. We're now at 17:59, so we're at 6 o'clock, so that's nearly an hour of installation, okay? So not for the faint-hearted. Now we're at 18:01, and you think, yay, it's nearly at the end, woohoo! And then it says a restart is required, and you're like, oh no. Oh, good God, no, this could actually take forever. So, as you know, restarts with machines nowadays, particularly Windows 10, take an absolute age. And you think to yourself, I'm never going to see the desktop again. But never mind. What you do is you restart, of course, because you have no choice. And then hopefully when you come back eventually, ooh, look at what's happened here. We're at 1926. I don't know if that actually did happen. I probably just let it restart and went to sleep or something, and came back and decided to see what was kicking. So now what you can do is go down to the sort of edit box searching facility in Windows 10, and you can put in Visual and Visual Studio 2019 as an app should pop up. At least that's the plan, yes? After that, this will appear, and you're going, yay, we're nearly there. And then you can, in fact, start to make your, customize your environment. So you can make it the color you want. I prefer sort of lighter colors because my eyes, I'm old. Some people prefer sort of darker colors. So you can actually customize the way you want Visual Studio to look. You can change this later, so it's no big deal. And then what will happen is, we're preparing for first time use. This may take a few minutes, and oh God, we're bloody waiting. One thing about computer programming is that it certainly teaches you the virtue of patience, okay? So, here we go. Eventually we're into it, it's good. And then we're going to be looking at creating a new project. So select this, create a new project. And then when you create a new project, you can create a multitude of different sorts of projects, okay? So you get a number of choices. If you select the wrong choice and you fire the code that I'm going to give you into the coding window, it's not going to compile. And people will always say it doesn't work because you've set up the project incorrectly. Now, it is amazing to me that over 8 years of actually doing this job, the biggest source of error is actually setting up the project incorrectly. So make sure that you set it up correctly, which is console app, yes, bracket.NET Core. And this is a project for creating a command line application that can run on a .NET Core on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Okay? So you're selecting that particular option. Select this option. If you select any other one, you're screwed. Okay. So you can configure the project as you see fit. It normally puts it in some kind of default location. But I kind of prefer to save everything to the desktop until I'm finished with it. That's just a force of habit in my regard. So you can actually browse to the location that you're wanting it to be. I always put, for this purpose, for just testing if the environment is stable and working, I put a little test folder and I call the solution, the project name and the solution name will invariably be the same. They sort of fill each other out. So call it test, save it wherever you like, generally save it to the desktop and make sure you can actually find it again. And then, let's see, you would select create the project, okay? So there's a create button down here, okay? Once you're done. So next you'll see something along these lines. Now, for every programming language, for every programming course in the world, there is always a sort of basic programming exercise that's called the Hello World program. And every lecturer, every academic, every teacher has always done that sort of thing. And they have in fact anticipated this, and what they do is they give you a basic Hello World program to start you off. Now, all the constituents are there. The only thing that they've actually added really is a sort of extra caveat to make your life sort of super helpful, well, make them super helpful, make your life super easy. It's console.writeline hello world. Okay, so that will display once run. And you get all of this through working on the lab. If you select that little green arrow there, that will execute the program, compile it, and you will see this appear on your screen. So it's hello world, yay, with other things as well. So that's all good. That's how you actually install it. That's how you test it and make sure that everything's fine. That's the only way I know how to do it, unfortunately, and that's the instructions, the only instructions I can really give you on that. So in terms of creating an executable, an exe is a file that you run to launch a program. There are several steps involved. You've got the editor, the source code. It then goes through the compiler, the object code, the linker, and then the executable file is generated. Okay. So console applications in C#, this is what we'll look at first because they are the simplest, takes input and displays output to command line console, okay? Provides a sort of very, very, very simple user interface. So if you want to create a new project, it's a console application and you always get the name of the language there as well, okay? So you'll notice that down this particular list, if you're creating a new project, you get a number of languages that you can actually use. So be careful that you select the right one. So provides a simple user interface for applications requiring little or no user interaction. So later on we might get into graphical user interfaces. They're of course a little bit more complex when you're considering things like Windows and graphical applications, of course. And it's good for learning C# language features. So these are the sort of bare bones. Okay, so creating a new project, that's what it looks like, okay? Console.app, yep. Once you've sort of done that, hello world pops up. If you're using Visual Studio 2015 or 2017, you get a slightly sort of different result to this. So you won't get the hello world thing, and you get more sort of using directives there at the top, and they've sort of done away with that in 2019. As you can see from here. So that's what you get once you create that new project in 2019, okay? So you get the hello world, and all of this is sort of done away with because it's not irrelevant, it's still sort of there, but it's something that you do not need to know, okay? So here's an example of an outline of a program in C#. So you can see from this, you have the using directives. These are substantially reduced in Microsoft Visual Studio 2019, but you can add them to gain access to functionality. We'll do that later. Sometimes you require to add little bits of extra functionality like random number generators and things like that into the program. And you include these by the directives, or that you get access to the code using the directives, but we'll discuss that later. There is a namespace which encompasses the entire sort of program. There is a class called program. Everything in C# is encompassed in classes, and the programming class holds everything essentially. Okay. Then you have the main method. Now the main method is where everything else is called from. Okay. That's what we really need to know about that for the moment. So here's a sort of outline of one. A very, very simple program where the program asks you to enter your first name, reads it in, your last name, reads it in, and then says welcome to programming with objects, and outputs the first name string and the surname string. So there's the using directives there. You've got your namespace, good. These are all sort of generated. Do not screw with these things. Okay? Just alter the stuff inside the class program, okay, for the moment, and inside the actual main as well, before we start coming up with different functions and different methods. Okay, if you mess with these, it will upset the structure of the program and nothing will compile. And it's very, very important where you put things as well. Okay, so that's the main method. So what we have here is what we sort of discussed last week, where a program can basically be broken down into input, process, output. So what we have here is inputting, yes. We have the processing, yes, and the output. This is really the inputting here. The arrows are a bit off, unfortunately, so please enter your name, that's an input. Console.readline, that's taking that in as an input, and then the last name, once again, that's an input, and then it processes it, and this is really the output here. Okay, so that's all fine. You can add comments. This is text for people to read. It's not for the compiler at all. The compiler will ignore it. It's considered to be good programming practice, and allows other programmers to read the code more effectively. You can use single line or multi-line comments. So single line are those sort of dashes here, and multi-line is a dash with an asterisk, yes. Extremely effective method for debugging and error finding, as you'll see as we go through the module, because you can block out sections of code, or you can block out lines and things like that to see, is the problem actually coming from that particular line of code or this particular section, and you can start to narrow things down. So it's very effective in that sort of way. So here's an example of comments. Now this is our sort of first game, and all that's doing is writing to the screen game over, and that's it. But also you have this comment in the code itself, or these comments, game over, a first C++ program is what it says there. It actually should say a C# program. I become muddled and use both at times, so that's the way it goes with me. So they're ignored by the compiler. They're considered to be good programming practice, and are used to tell people who have just opened the source code what the program actually does. So this is an example of blocking out sort of one line. Yeah. You can, of course, block out the entire thing if you like, by using that, and it all turns green. And that's a sort of nice piece of functionality to say, to use. You can block out entire sections, and that's how you actually do it. So later on, if you suspect that a piece of code is causing an error, you can rather conveniently deactivate it and sort of put it on ice for a little while. In the C# Player's Guide, what makes a good comment? There's a bunch of sort of guidelines here. Write the comments as soon as you've written the code. Don't necessarily put comments on ridiculously simplistic code that everyone understands. Use comments to add to the value of the code. If the code is really self-explanatory, then try not to bother. It's really a bit of a waste of time. Try not to over-comment as well. And you can use comments as a warning when particular chunks of code are tricky. Yeah. And it translates everything into a sort of human readable version of perhaps algorithms, okay? So generally the first program is Hello World. If you're using Visual Studio 2015 or 2017, you will have to have that console.read key line of code there for some bizarre reason. If you're using 2019, it's not necessary. Okay. So there we have it. The hello world gives a little output like that, just saying hello world, and everything is nice. Yeah. Okay, generally the first program is that. The next program generally has some input and output. Input, process, output as usual, and it's please enter your first name. So get into the sort of habit of thinking about this in terms of systematic steps. I want to output to the screen, please enter your name or your first name to the user. And then you've got to sort of read that in when the user inputs it using the return key. So you have a sort of string declaration here, which is first name, which is then reading that from the console application, so console.readline and into the input stream. Okay. Then you've got console.write. This is just outputting some text. Hello there, and plus the output of the variable that you've just sort of created and stored something in, so the first name. So that makes sort of sense there. And that should really have, please enter your first name. I put in Thomas, and it's hello there, Thomas, and that is relatively simplistic. Now, with all of this, all of these examples that I ever give you in slides, you can probably just copy and paste the entire thing into a coding window, and it should run, apart from possibly a few errors. And if there are errors, then just simply fix them. I say that because in the last slide there was a rogue bracket. Now that wouldn't compile probably, or it might have difficulty compiling. But if you suspect that, then just whip it out. Okay. Okay, so in this example, we have a message to the screen asking the user for their first name. In this line of code, we're declaring a string variable to hold the first name while simultaneously reading it in using the console.readline. Okay, and then we're printing out the message hello and the first name variable being in the input as well. Okay, and this is really a command if you're using 2015 and 2017 to pause the screen in C# as well. You don't always necessarily need that. Sometimes if you find that the screen disappears or doesn't appear at all, this will happen in a nanosecond. So you might not even realize that anything's happened. And you do get people that have forgotten to pause the screen, and they execute the program. That the program perhaps executes well, unless of course it's taking an output. But if it were like just a hello world or something like that, what may happen is it would just output hello world to the screen without you even realizing that it's there, because it would be over like that, and people think that the program is perhaps not working. So what could happen in this particular case, and you don't pause it, is that you put in your name, and then the other output will be over with as quick as the blink of an eye, over in the blink of an eye. And you might not see it. Okay? So make sure all of these are at the top of your program if you're using 2015, 2017, but I'll be using system in 2019. And if you get an error message, you get this. So there were build errors. Would you like to continue and run from the last successful build? If you do not have a last successful build, then nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to happen for a start. But if you run from the last successful build, then it's not fixing the error. So always select no to this. So what now? I've got a lab 1. So this is a big lengthy process that I'm asking of you this week, I suppose, to download this piece of software onto your home machine. Ensure you can get the development environment working, and test this small program running. Then access the notes through Aura, and install this particular piece of software as well. And there's also a lab which is very, very simple. It's only 2 pages long, but it gets you to sort of mess about with the variables and the outputs to the screen and all that sort of thing. It's quite a lengthy process this week, this installation. So I apologise for that, but it is sort of necessary. And also the lab is very simplistic, but do read every insignificant little detail You do get a lot of people that come into programming courses and they tend to just simply read over everything as quickly as possible, fire it into the coding window, and if it doesn't work, it's a case of, oh no, what am I going to do? So make sure that you understand, that you read everything, and process it all. So, I mean, definitely do read the labs quite thoroughly, because, believe it or not, I don't write them for the good of my health, and sometimes I do sort of make mistakes in them as well. But do read them thoroughly and make sure that you understand them, and hopefully we'll be at a better sort of point next week to do something a wee bit more interesting. But this is a massive sort of installation of software and a small lab. But once you sort of get everything sort of stable, everything should be quite interesting from here on in. Okay, right. I shall catch you next week then.
Bye bye.